United Kingdom has held a privileged position as one of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council since the body's inception in 1945. Alongside the United States, the Soviet Union, now Russia, China and France, the UK has wielded significant global influence, particularly through its veto power and its role in shaping global peace and security. However, the 21st century has seen a significant shift in global power dynamics, economic influence, and geopolitical relevance. This essay argues that the UK has lost its historical stature and no longer merits its place as a permanent member of the UNSC. It explores this contention through a detailed analysis of the UK's declining military strength, economic stagnation, political instability, and diminishing international significance. By doing so, it illuminates the stark realities of a country that has, in many respects, failed to adapt to the changing contours of global geopolitics. At the end of World War II, the UK was one of the victorious Allied powers, and its permanent seat on the UNSC was both a recognition of its role in defeating fascism and an acknowledgement of its global empire. At that time, the British Empire spanned nearly a quarter of the world's landmass and population, and the UK was a leading industrial and military power. Its global presence, including a vast colonial network, ensured that it was a central player in shaping the post-war international order. However, the reality of 1945 contrasts starkly with the Britain of today. The empire has vanished, leaving behind a commonwealth that lacks real political or economic cohesion. The industrial might that once powered Britain has atrophied, replaced by a service-oriented economy vulnerable to global shocks. As the geopolitical balance tilts towards emerging powers like India, Brazil, and Indonesia, the rationale for Britain's continued dominance in the UNSC is increasingly tenuous. The UK's military strength, a cornerstone of its UNSC legitimacy, has seen a marked decline. Once a dominant naval power, capable of projecting force across the globe, the Royal Navy has shrunk dramatically. In 1950, the UK had a fleet of over 500 warships. Today, that number has dwindled to fewer than 80, including a mere 2 aircraft carriers that lack the fleet to provide robust logistical support. Similarly, the British Army has been reduced to its smallest size since the Napoleonic Wars, with active personnel numbering just over 70,000 as of 2024. This reduction undermines the UK's ability to participate meaningfully in global peacekeeping operations or to project military power independently. Although the UK maintains a nuclear deterrent in the form of Trident submarines, its broader strategic capabilities are insufficient compared to rising powers. Nations like India and China have invested heavily in modernizing their militaries with advanced cyber capabilities, hypersonic missiles, and expansive space programs. By contrast, the UK has struggled to maintain even modest levels of defense spending, leading to obsolescence in critical areas like cyber defense and unmanned systems. The UK's involvement in Afghanistan and Iraq revealed the limitations of its military ambitions. Prolonged engagements drained resources and political capital while achieving ambiguous results. These failures have further eroded Britain's reputation as a reliable security partner, diminishing its influence within NATO and other alliances. The UK was once the workshop of the world, with its industrial output driving global trade. However, deindustrialization has hollowed out the economy, leaving it overly reliant on services, particularly finance. London's status as a financial hub masks the broader economic weaknesses of the country, including stagnant productivity and declining manufacturing output. Since the 1980s, successive governments have prioritized financial services over industry, resulting in the decline of traditional sectors like steel, shipbuilding, and textiles. This shift has left the UK ill-prepared to compete with emerging industrial powers like China, South Korea, and Germany. Brexit has exacerbated the UK's economic challenges. The decision to leave the European Union severed vital trade links, reduced foreign direct investment, and created regulatory uncertainty. According to the Office for Budget Responsibility, the UK's economy is now projected to grow more slowly than any other G7 country for the foreseeable future. The loss of tariff-free access to the EU's single market has harmed key industries, including automotive manufacturing and agriculture. Meanwhile, London's financial sector faces growing competition from Frankfurt, Paris, and Amsterdam, further eroding the UK's economic influence. The UK's national debt has ballooned to over £2.7 trillion, equivalent to more than 100% of GDP. This alarming figure undermines its ability to invest in critical areas like infrastructure, defense, and research. In contrast, emerging powers are leveraging their growing economies to expand their global influence, leaving the UK behind. One of the UK's greatest vulnerabilities is the threat of internal disintegration. Scotland, where support for independence remains high, could leave the UK following another referendum. Similarly, tensions in Northern Ireland, exacerbated by Brexit's impact on the Good Friday Agreement, threaten the union's stability. A fractured UK would lose its claim to be a global power, as its reduced population, territory, and economic base would render it a regional actor at best. The UK's ability to shape international diplomacy has waned significantly. While it remains a member of the G7 and NATO, its influence within these organizations is limited compared to larger powers like the US and Germany. Post-Brexit, Britain's exclusion from EU decision-making has further marginalized it on issues ranging from climate change to trade. Additionally, the UK's Global Britain strategy, intended to reinvigorate its international role, has largely failed. High-profile missteps, such as the chaotic evacuation from Kabul in 2021, have damaged its credibility as a reliable partner. India, with its 1.4 billion people and rapidly growing economy, is a prime candidate for UNSC reform. It is the world's fifth largest economy, with a GDP that has surpassed the UK. India's substantial military capabilities and active participation in UN peacekeeping missions bolster its case for a permanent seat. As the largest economy in South America, Brazil represents the global South and has been a vocal advocate for reforming the UNSC to reflect contemporary realities. Its leadership in regional organizations like Mercosur adds weight to its candidacy. With no African nation among the P5, the continent's billion-plus population remains underrepresented in global decision-making. Countries like South Africa and Nigeria have argued that their inclusion would better reflect the modern world order. Economic size. In 1870, the UK accounted for 9% of global GDP. Today, it contributes less than 3%. Global trade. The UK, once a leader in global trade, now accounts for only 2.3% of world exports, far behind China's 15%. Military personnel. The British Army is now smaller than that of Vietnam, which is not a major global power. Population. The UK's population of 67 million pales in comparison to emerging powers like Indonesia, with 277 million, and Brazil, with 214 million. Global influence. According to the Lowy Institute's Asia Power Index, the UK ranks behind India, Japan, and South Korea in terms of overall influence. The UNSC's structure reflects a post-World War II reality that no longer exists. Emerging powers, particularly those from the global South, argue that the P5 does not represent today's multipolar world. Adding countries like India, Brazil, and South Africa would make the UNSC more representative and legitimate. The UK's diminished economic, military, and political status undermines its claim to a permanent seat. Redistributing this seat to a more dynamic and globally relevant power would align the UNSC with the 21st century geopolitical landscape. The UK's historical contributions to global peace and security cannot be denied. However, its current status as a tiny, weak, and insignificant player on the world stage raises serious questions about its continued role as a permanent member of the UNSC. In a world increasingly defined by multipolarity and the rise of new powers, the UK's place at the table appears increasingly anachronistic. The UNSC must evolve to reflect contemporary realities. Reforming the Council to include more representative and capable nations would ensure its legitimacy and effectiveness in addressing the complex challenges of the modern world. For the UK, gracefully stepping aside could signal a recognition of this new reality and an opportunity to support a fairer and more inclusive global order.